Going to take a look now at what the international newspapers are making of that with Elena Casas, who joins me in the studio. Good morning. So starting off with that, Angela Merkel's comments.
Yes. Morning again, Claire. Look at this cartoon in The Guardian where they've taken that comment of Angela Merkel's that it's the toughest moment since the Second World War and shown her there dressed as Churchill with her two little minions there, Mario Monti and Lucas Pacaemos, both kind of waving their axes. Of course, their implication is that they're going to make big budget cuts under her instructions now. But of course, it won't necessarily be as straightforward as all that. If we look at the Italian paper Corriere della Sera, they've headlined this morning on Mario Monti, if I can't get the support of politicians, I'll have to resign. Of course, that emphasises there that he's got to win over lots of Italy's lawmakers before he can pass anything. There's lots of things, though, that the Corriere della Sera would like to see him pass. They've got a list, in fact, of 26, one for each letter of the alphabet. 26 things they'd like to see Mario Monti do, mostly government expenses that they say are wasteful, that they want him to get rid of, like B is for blue cars, which in Italy are meant to be specially for ministers, and they can get through red lights and you have to get out of the way if you see one coming. But apparently they're not just for ministers anymore, there's thousands in the country, and they cost the state 60 million euros last year. So it's that kind of thing the Corriere della Sera says he needs to slash.
Moving on to another story, an Iranian nuclear scientist killed at the weekend in an explosion reported as accidental, but now there are rumours that Israel was behind this.
Yes, this is all over the Israeli press, including in this report in the Yehidot Ahronoth. Now, they say that according to both Western and Iranian intelligence sources, they suspect Mossad, the Israel intelligence service, could have been behind that explosion that killed an Iranian nuclear scientist on Wednesday. There's also been rumours flying around that Israel is preparing for a nuclear strike on Iran to stop its nuclear program. And the Huffington Post is having a look at what that might mean for the world economy if they did do that. Now, they've headlined this piece that the euro collapse plus an Iranian strike could equal Armageddon. And what they mean is that if Israel did attack Iran, it would cause the oil price to surge, which would in its turn trigger economic problems for the rest of the world, which is already suffering from the euro crisis.
Now, moving on to the Wall Street protests, we were just saying earlier that they've started evicting protesters in New York, and The Guardian has a look at the protest movement worldwide.
Yes, they're criticising police treatment all around the US, really, saying that in Denver, for example, protesters were evacuated using rubber bullets. In California, someone broke a rib because they were attacked by police using batons. There's a piece in the Huffington Post which calls this the kind of police behaviour you'd expect in Egypt rather than in the US. So the police have been widely criticised. But as you were saying, The Guardian have done a nice piece today showing just how far those protests have spread, despite them being suppressed in their original home of the US. If we look at that world map, you can see they've spread to India, South Africa, Malaysia and Argentina, miles away from their original home.
And moving on to Britain, newspapers themselves are in trouble there.
Yes, on the front page of The Independent, the headline is "The Press is on trial." Now, they're talking about the Leveson inquiry, which is investigating those phone hacking allegations at the News of the World, and now it seems some other papers. And part of its job is to come up with recommendations for how the press should be regulated in the future so that this can't happen again. Now, it turned out yesterday that the now closed News of the World isn't necessarily the only paper involved in this. Both the Sun and the Daily Mirror have been implicated. And whether or not all the papers were actually involved in this, Claire, according to today's Guardian, it looks like they've all been tarred with the same brush by some of the public. There's an article in here saying that 58% of the British public say they trust newspapers less than they did 6 months ago before the phone hacking scandal erupted. One more question for you now then, Claire. When I say to you Democratic Republic of the Congo, what springs to mind?
I have to say conflict.
Well, most people would say so. You wouldn't necessarily pick it as the place you'd go for your next holiday, would you? But apparently lots of people are. There's a piece in The Guardian saying tourists there have doubled in just a year. Now they go to, say, mountain gorillas and active volcanoes and safaris where you can see lions, leopards and elephants. If you look at that picture there of an exploding volcano and how close the tourists can get to it, you can see how people might be attracted to going there. And the paper says it might actually be a wonderful way for the country to be able to pull itself out of a chaos and conflict if they can attract more tourists and thus more tourist dollars.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Elena Casas. A look at the international newspapers.